I wasn't planning on staying long that afternoon. Just long enough to drop by, borrow the old ladder from my friend, and head home. That was the routine. Quick in, quick out. But his mom answered the door. She always did. Mid-40s, hair tied back in that way that looked unpracticed but somehow precise, like she didn't have to try. She smiled at me, not wide, not forced, just enough to make me forget what I came for. "You again," she said softly, half a joke, half a welcome. I laughed, rubbing the back of my neck. "Yeah, borrowing the ladder." Again. Her eyes flicked down to my shoes, muddy from last night's rain, and she shook her head, amused. "You'll track that all over my floor if you're not careful." She moved aside so I could step in, and I noticed the small things, the way I always did. The faint scent of coffee lingering from hours ago. The steady tick of a clock in the living room. A folded newspaper on the counter, edges too neat to have been left by my friend. She folded her arms lightly, watching me more than she needed to. I told myself it was nothing, just her being polite. Still, something about the way she leaned against the counter, like she wasn't in a hurry to leave the silence hanging between us, made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't quite name. "You want something to drink?" she asked after a moment. "Tea, maybe." I hesitated. I should have said no. I should have gotten the ladder, said thanks, and walked out. That would have been easier. Safer. But I nodded. "Tea's fine." While she filled the kettle, I sat at the table. My fingers hovered over my phone, then slipped it back into my pocket without unlocking it. A half-written message sat there waiting for someone I never sent it to. It had been waiting for weeks. The kettle hissed. She placed a cup in front of me, her hand brushing the edge of the table as though anchoring herself there. She didn't sit across from me. She stayed standing, like she needed the distance. "You don't talk much, do you?" she said finally, but her tone wasn't critical. More curious, maybe even careful. I shrugged, staring at the steam curling out of the mug. "Guess I don't have much to say." She laughed quietly under her breath. That can be a good thing. Her eyes lingered a second too long, and then she looked away, as if she'd caught herself. She wiped an invisible speck from the counter. I caught myself watching her hands more than I should have. It was just tea, just a conversation. But I left the cup half full because my throat wouldn't let me finish it. The ladder was heavier than I remembered when she finally brought it out. I carried it awkwardly down the steps, aware of her watching from the doorway. She wasn't smiling this time, just present. "Don't mention the tea to him," she said as I reached the sidewalk. Her voice low, almost casual. "This stays between us." I froze for a second, gripping the ladder tighter than necessary. There was no reason for my heart to beat that fast. No reason for my chest to feel warm and guilty all at once. But I nodded. "Yeah, sure." And I kept walking, pretending her words didn't mean more than they should. The truth? I knew even then. I wasn't going to forget them. It should have ended with the ladder. Borrowed, used, returned. That's what I told myself. That's what anyone would expect. But a week later, I was back. This time with nothing to borrow, no excuse ready on my tongue. My friend wasn't home. His mom was. She looked surprised. Then something softer crossed her face. Not quite relief, not quite caution. "You again," she said, the same words as before, but slower this time. I half smiled. "Guess so." She let me in without asking why. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Afternoon light slipped through the blinds, catching on the edges of framed photos. Most were of my friend at different ages, soccer uniforms, graduation gown, crooked grins. None with his dad. I noticed that before I caught myself looking too long. "Tea?" she asked, already reaching for the kettle. I nodded. I didn't know why. Maybe because I liked the way she set 2 cups out as though she'd been expecting me. We sat at the table this time, across from each other. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. "My son tells me you're always helping him with his car," she said. "Mostly just watching him swear at the engine," I said. "I hand him tools sometimes." Her laugh was small, but real. She stirred her tea though she hadn't added sugar. I should have stopped there. I should have let it stay ordinary. But my voice moved before I thought. "You always make it neat in here." Her eyes lifted to mine, curious, then guarded. She pressed the spoon down against the rim of her cup. "Habit. You notice things too much." I looked down at my hands. Guess I do. The words hung there, heavier than I meant them. She set the spoon aside, fingers brushing her temple, tucking a strand of hair back like she needed something to do with her hands. I used to hate the quiet, she said finally. After the divorce. Couldn't stand it. TV on all the time, just so it wouldn't feel like the walls were listening. I watched her lips curve, not into a smile, but something that carried memory in it. She blinked, and for a second, I thought maybe she regretted telling me. I don't mind quiet now, she added quickly, almost covering it up. I nodded, though my chest felt too tight. She'd given me something private, and I wasn't sure if I deserved to hold it. We sipped our tea. The clock ticked. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I ignored it. I imagined what it would look like if someone walked in right then. My friend, maybe, or a neighbor. Two people at a kitchen table, talking about nothing, drinking tea. Ordinary. And yet I couldn't shake how unordinary it felt. She noticed me glancing at the family photos again and said quietly, "He doesn't know how much I worry. About him. About everything." Her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. I just nodded. The kettle clicked again from cooling. She reached to move it, and her hand brushed mine where it rested on the table. Neither of us pulled back immediately. The touch was light, almost accidental, but the pause after wasn't. She smiled faintly, eyes lowering, as though she'd realized something she shouldn't have. "You're too quiet," she murmured. "And you notice too much," I said before I could stop myself. The silence stretched. She withdrew her hand, folding it around her cup. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. And the worst part? I wanted her to. The next time was different. I wasn't supposed to be there at all. I'd only stopped by to return the ladder, finally, after putting it off too long. I rehearsed the plan in my head, drop it, wave goodbye, walk away. But she opened the door before I could knock. Like she'd been standing close, listening. "Hey," she said. Her voice sounded softer than the hallway light should allow. I lifted the ladder slightly, awkward. "Bringing this back." She stepped aside. "You can put it in the laundry room." Inside, the air smelled faintly of soap and fabric softener. I leaned the ladder against the wall, dust on my hands. She followed me, standing too near, her shoulder almost brushing mine. "You're good at helping," she said quietly. "Most people don't notice when things need doing." I shrugged, not trusting myself to look at her. "Just a ladder." "Still," she said. The silence grew again. Too big. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat closed around the words. And then, footsteps. My friend's voice echoing down the hall. I froze. She did too. Her hand lifted slightly, as if to hush me, though I hadn't spoken. We stood there, waiting, until the footsteps passed the door and moved upstairs. She let out a breath. "He didn't see you." The relief in her tone twisted something sharp in me. This wasn't harmless. Not anymore. "I should go," I muttered. But I didn't. I lingered. Her eyes searched mine, as though she wanted to measure what I was holding back. "You're different," she said. The words slipped out, and then she looked away, pretending she hadn't said them. "Different how?" My voice cracked slightly. She shook her head, almost smiling, almost regretful. "Doesn't matter." We stood in the narrow laundry room, the hum of the dryer filling the air. Too loud. My hand brushed against the edge of the washing machine, restless. She tucked her hair behind her ear, avoiding me. The urge to say something, something too honest, rose in my chest, and I nearly gave in. My lips parted, but no words came. She looked back at me then, eyes lingering too long, and I felt it. The pull, the almost. If I leaned closer, just a little, but she stepped back. Barely, just enough to break it. Her voice steadied, though her hands fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater. "Don't make this harder than it already is." I swallowed, the unfinished words burning on my tongue. I left before I could ruin something neither of us dared name. And all the way home, I kept replaying the moment. How close we'd been, how close we hadn't been. It happened on a walk. Not planned, not arranged. I'd been cutting through the park on my way back from the store when I saw her sitting alone on a bench, coat wrapped tight against the early evening chill. She looked smaller like that, folded into herself, as if the world had pressed her into quiet. I almost passed by. Almost. But she lifted her head, caught me in the corner of her gaze, and something in her expression, lonely, unguarded, made my steps falter. "You're out late," I said, awkwardly, stopping near the bench. "Just needed air," she replied. Her voice was flat, but not unfriendly. I hesitated, then sat down beside her. Not too close. Just enough. The silence stretched. I shifted the grocery bag in my hands, feeling the weight of nothing but bread and milk. Somehow it felt like contraband. She spoke first. "He doesn't come home much anymore." I knew she meant my friend. Her son. But the way she said it, low, with a small twist of her mouth, carried more than disappointment. It carried something that sounded like ache. I didn't know what to say, so I told the truth. "I think he takes you for granted." Her head tilted slightly, like she wasn't expecting that. She gave a short laugh, almost bitter. "Everyone does, eventually." I glanced at her then, really looked. The streetlight caught strands of silver in her hair, the fine lines at the corner of her eyes. Not flaws, details. Proof that she had lived more than I had, seen more, carried more. "You don't let people see you," I said quietly, the words escaping before I could hold them. Her hands tightened in her lap. "And you think you do?" I didn't answer. The air shifted, colder now, sharper. She turned her face away, staring out toward the empty swings. "Sometimes I wonder," she murmured, "if people only see what they want from me. A mother, a neighbor, someone useful. But me, just me? I don't know if anyone notices." Her voice trembled, barely, and I felt something break open inside me. "I notice," I said. Too quickly, too raw. The silence that followed was unbearable. My chest pounded, like I'd confessed more than I had. Maybe I had. She finally looked at me, her eyes glossy in the dim light. "Don't say things like that." "I didn't mean," I started, then stopped, because I had meant it. Every word. Her breath caught, and she shifted, pressing her hand to the bench between us as though steadying herself. "You're too young to understand what that means." But her voice betrayed her, soft, breaking at the edges. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, gripping my hands together so I wouldn't do something reckless. "Maybe I understand more than you think." The weight of the words sat between us. Too heavy, too dangerous. She stared at me, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might reach out. Her fingers twitched, then stilled. The park around us was quiet, only the faint rustle of leaves. My bag slid to the ground with a soft thud. "Tell me," I whispered before I could stop myself. "Am I wrong for feeling this?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. Just silence, thick, fragile. The question hung there, unanswered, and the night seemed to hold its breath with us. After that night on the bench, I expected something to shift. I thought maybe the next time I saw her, there would be a glance that lasted longer than it should, or a silence heavy with meaning. Some signal that what we almost said, what we almost did, had been real. But when I came by, she wasn't there. 3 times in a row, my friend answered the door instead. "Mom's out," he said casually, tossing his keys on the counter. "Out." Each time, the word landed harder. Out. Somewhere. With someone. The 4th time, I didn't even knock. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the light under her door, wondering if she knew I was there. And then I stopped showing up. For a week, I didn't pass by the house. I told myself I was busy. Work, errands, excuses. But it wasn't busyness, it was fear. Fear that if I saw her and she looked right through me, I wouldn't know how to carry that. When I finally did see her again, it wasn't at the house. It was in the grocery store. She was at the far end of the aisle, sliding a carton of eggs into her basket. She noticed me, paused, and in that tiny pause, I thought maybe everything we hadn't said was still alive between us. But then she smiled. A polite, neighborly smile. Nothing more. Nothing less. "Hey," I said, voice rougher than I meant. "Hi," she answered, and turned back to her cart. Something in me tightened. She was acting, pretending nothing had happened, nothing was happening. I followed her with my eyes, wanting her to look back, to give me something real. She didn't. At the checkout, I caught a glimpse of her hand. A ring, not on the usual finger, but a silver band on her right hand I'd never seen before. My stomach dropped. I wanted to ask, but I couldn't. Not there. Not with the cashier between us and the beep of the scanner filling the air. That night, I sat on my bed with my phone in my hand. A message half-typed. Did I do something wrong? Did I imagine it? I stared at the blinking cursor. My thumb hovered over send. And then I erased it. Days passed like that. Quiet, dragging. Every time my phone buzzed, I wanted it to be her. It never was. Once, I thought about knocking on her door. I even walked down her street, stood on the opposite sidewalk, staring up at her window. Her lamp was on. The curtain moved. But I didn't cross over. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And so I left the sidewalk empty, her window lit against the dark, and went home. It was late when it finally happened. Not planned, not expected, just me, standing outside her building with no excuse left to give myself. The night air was cool, the kind that sharpened the silence. I told myself I'd leave if the light in her window went out. But it didn't. I knocked. When she opened the door, her expression shifted. First surprise, then something harder to name. Not anger, not relief. Something caught between the two. Is he here? I asked quickly, meaning her son. She shook her head. No, just me. I almost left then. Almost said goodnight and walked away. But my feet stayed where they were, and she stepped aside. Inside, the kitchen light was dim, only one bulb working. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, as though bracing for something. I sat at the table, my hands restless against the wood. Neither of us spoke at first. The hum of the fridge filled the air, steady and too loud. Finally, she said, "You shouldn't be here." I know. Silence again. She pressed her fingers to her temple, then let them fall. I thought maybe if I pulled away, you'd stop. Her voice trailed off. Stop what? I asked, though I already knew. She looked at me then, eyes sharp and tired at once. Looking at me like that, the words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were wrong, but because they were true. I lowered my gaze, voice tight. I tried. She exhaled, almost a laugh, but without humor. You're too young to carry something like this. And you're too scared to let anyone see you, I said before I could stop myself. Her lips parted, ready to reply, but she didn't. Instead, her hand gripped the counter, knuckles pale. For a moment, I thought she might ask me to leave. I almost wished she would. But then she whispered, "You make me feel noticed." The words were small, fragile, but they cracked something open in me. I pushed my chair back, not closer, not further. Just enough to steady myself. That's all I wanted. For you to know that. Her eyes glistened, and she shook her head, as though trying to dismiss it, but her voice trembled. It isn't fair. To you. To me. I swallowed hard. Then tell me to stop. Tell me, and I'll walk out, and won't come back. The pause that followed stretched long enough to feel like a lifetime. She stared at the table, then at me. Her mouth opened, closed. And then she sat down across from me. Slowly, carefully, like surrendering a little. Her hand rested on the table, inches from mine. She didn't move it closer, but she didn't take it away. Okay, she whispered. I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't lean across the table. I just let the words settle into the quiet, heavier than anything else we could have said. Okay, time didn't stop after that night. We didn't suddenly start meeting in secret or whispering promises in the dark. What happened in her kitchen didn't flip a switch. It just softened something between us. The next morning, life looked the same. I went to class. She went to work. My friend still called me to gripe about his car. But when I stopped by the house, she opened the door differently. Not cautious, not guarded, just open. We fell into a rhythm that no one else noticed. Tea at her table some afternoons. A shared laugh over burnt toast. Quiet company on her walks when the evenings stretched long. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was just steady. She told me once, sitting across from me at 8:47 a.m. with her coffee still black and untouched. I used to think I'd be alone for the rest of it. I didn't answer right away. I just slid the sugar jar across the table, watched her smile faintly as she took a spoonful, and let the silence be enough. The park bench still waits for us some nights. Sometimes we sit there, saying nothing, just listening to the leaves overhead. Other times, she tells me stories she's never told before, about her first apartment, About the years she thought she'd broken beyond repair. I don't always know what to say, but I always listen. I'm still her son's friend. That fact hasn't disappeared. But the weight of it has shifted, turned into something we live with instead of run from. She doesn't hide anymore. Not from me, anyway. And I've stopped waiting for the moment it all collapses. Instead, I've learned the quiet truth of being here, of showing up, of noticing, of staying. One evening, as I was leaving, she reached for my sleeve. Not dramatic, not desperate. Just a light tug to keep me there for one more second. "Tea tomorrow?" she asked. I nodded. "Tea tomorrow." I don't know if we'll ever put a name on what this is. Maybe we don't need to. What matters is the steadiness, the ordinary rituals that no one else sees. Like her folding a napkin without thinking. Like me flicking my eyes toward her hands. Always, without meaning to. Like the silence that never feels empty anymore. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't the ladder, or the park bench, or even the night she said, "This stays between us." It was the way she looked at me when she thought no one noticed. And the way, in that look, I knew I wasn't invisible anymore.